We know the Russians have been attacking us. I've talked a lot about it on the radio station, all kinds of stations, in fact, here over the last couple of weeks. And I am doing something special. We are going through the things you can do to keep safe. Last week, we started doing something I promised we would continue, and that is, how can you protect yourself when it comes to the Russians, right? When it comes to the bad guys, because the Russians are definitely the bad guys. There's a few things you can do, and there's a few things, frankly, you shouldn't be doing, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So last week we went over some steps, some things that you can look at, that you should look at, that are going to help protect you. And we are going to go into this a whole lot more today. And so I want you to stick around. And if you miss anything, you can go online. You can go to craigpeterson.com. Make sure you sign up there for my email. And what I'm going to do for you is I will send you a few different documents. Now, we can chat back and forth about it, but I can send you this. Now, I'm recording this on video as well as on audio, so you can follow along if you're watching either on YouTube or over on Rumble, and you can find it also on my website. I've been trying to post it up there too. But right now, let's talk about what we call passive backend protections. So you've got the front end, and the front end, of course, is stuff coming at you, maybe to the firewall. I've mentioned last week about customers of mine. I was just looking at a few customers this week just so I could have an idea at their firewalls. And they were getting about 10 attacks per minute. Yeah, and these were customers who have requirements from the Department of Defense because they are defense subcontractors. So again, potential bad guys. So I looked up their IP addresses and where the attacks were coming from. Now remember, that doesn't mean where they originated, because the bad guys can hop through multiple machines and then get onto your machine. What it means is that ultimately they ended up coming from one machine, right? So there's an IP address of that machine that's attacking my clients or attacking my machines. It just happens all the time. A lot of scans, but some definite attacks where they're trying to log in using SSH. And what I found is these were coming from Slovakia, Russia, and Iran. Kind of what you were expecting, right? The Iranians, they just haven't given up yet. They keep trying to attack, particularly our military and our industry. One of the things we found out this week from, again, this was an FBI notice, is that the Russians have been going after our industrial base. And that includes, in fact, it's more specifically our automobile manufacturers. We've already got problems, right? Try buying a new car, try buying parts. I was with my friend just this week. I helped him because he had his car, right? It needed to get picked up. So I took him over to pick up his car, and we chatted a little bit with this small independent automotive repair shop. And they were telling us that they're getting sometimes 6 to 8 week delays on getting parts, and some parts they just can't get. So they're going to everything from junkyards on out. And the worst parts are the parts, the official parts from the car manufacturers. So what's been happening is Russia apparently has been hacking into these various automobile manufacturers and automobile parts manufacturers. And once they're inside, they've been putting in remote control botnets. And those botnets now have the ability to wake up when they want them to wake up. And then once they've woken up, what do? Who knows? They've been busy erasing machines, causing nothing but havoc. They've been doing all kinds of stuff in the past. Today, they're sitting there idle, which makes you think they're waiting. It's accumulate as much as you possibly can. And then once you've got it all accumulated, go ahead and attack. So they could control thousands of machines. But they're not just in the U.S., it's automobile manufacturers in Japan as well that we found out about. So that's what they're doing right now. So you got the kind of that front end and back end protections. So we're going to talk a little bit about the back end. What does that mean when a cybersecurity guy talks about the back end and the protection? I got it up on my screen right now, but here's the things you can do. Okay, remember, small businesses are just getting nailed from these guys because, again, they're fairly easy targets. One, change your passwords, right? How many times do we have to say that? And yet, about 70% of businesses out there are not using a good password methodology. Again, if you want more information on passwords, two-factor authentication, you name it, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. I want to get the information out. Now, you got to make sure that all of the passwords on your systems are encrypted, are stored in some sort of a good password vault. As you really should be looking at 256-bit encryption or better. I have a vendor of mine that I use. So if you get my emails every week, when then there's the little training, and so I'll give you a 5-minute training. It's written. Usually it's in bullet point form, just to help you understand things. That provider of mine has a big database, and there's another provider that I use that is for training. So the training guys use the database of my provider. In using that database, they're storing the passwords. And the training providers putting passwords in the clear into the database, which is absolutely crazy. So again, if you're a business, if you're storing any sort of personal information, particularly passwords, make sure that you're using good encryption and you're what's called salting the hash, which means you're not really storing the password, you're storing a salted hash. I can send you more on this if you are a business and you're developing software. This is long tail stuff here. Configure all of the security password settings so that if someone's trying to log in and is failing, and you block it. Many of us, let's say you're a small business. I see this all of the time, okay? You're not to blame. But you have a firewall that came from the cable company. Maybe you bought it at a big box retailer. Maybe you bought it online over at Amazon. And it's working really great for you. Has it got settings on there that let you say, hey, if there's 20 attempts to log in, maybe we should stop them? Now, what we do personally for our customers is typically we'll block them at somewhere around 3 or 4 failed attempts, and then their passwords blocked. Now, you can configure that sort of thing if you're using email, and that's an important thing to do, let me tell you, because we've had some huge breaches due to email, like Microsoft email, and passwords and people logging in and stealing stuff. It was just a total nightmare for the entire industry last year. But limit the number of login retries as well as you're in there. These excessive login attempts, whatever you want to define it as, needs to lock the account. And what that means is, even if they have the right password, they can't get in. And you have to use an administrative password in order to get in. You also want to what's called throttle the rate of repeated logins. Now, you might have gotten caught on this, right? You went to your bank, you went to eBay, you went to any of these places, and all of a sudden it denied you, right? It blocked you. That can happen when your account is on these hackers' lists. Remember last week we talked about password spraying? Well, that's a very big deal, and hackers are doing the spraying trick all of the time, and that is causing you to get locked out of your own account. So if you do get locked out, remember it might be because someone's trying to break in. Obviously, you have to enforce the policies. CAPTCHA is a very good thing. Again, this is more for a software developer. We always recommend that you use multi-factor or two-factor authentication, and Do not use your SMS, your text messages for that, where they'll send you a text message to verify who you are. If you can avoid that, you're much better off, because there's some easy ways to get around that for hackers that are determined, okay? Multi-factor, again, install an intrusion detection system. We put right at the network edge and between workstations and servers, even inside the network, we put detection systems that look for intrusion attempts and block intrusion attempts. Very important. Use deny lists to block known attackers. We build them automatically. We use some of the higher end Cisco gear. Cisco is a big network provider. They have some of the best hardware and software out there, and you have to subscribe to it. A lot of people complain, well, I can just go buy a firewall for $200 on Amazon. Why would I pay that much a month just to have a Cisco firewall? It's like paying for the brand. I got my logoed shirt on here. I wouldn't pay for that. No, it's because they are automatically providing block lists that are updated by the minute sometimes. And then make sure you've got an incident response plan in place. What are you going to do when they come for you? What are you going to do? Bad boys, bad boys. Stick around. We got a lot more to talk about here as we go. I am explaining the hacks that are going on right now and what you can do as a business and an individual to help protect yourself. Don't go anywhere. Now we're going to talk about prevention. What can you do in order to stop some of these attacks that are coming from Russia and from other countries? It is huge, people. Believe me, this is a very big problem, and I'm here to help. Hi, I'm Craig Peterson, your Chief Information Security Officer. We've reviewed a number of things that are important when it comes to your cybersecurity and your protection. We talked about the front end, we talked about the back end. Now we're going to talk about pure prevention. And if you're watching online, you'll be able to see my slides as they come up as we talk about some of this stuff. And you'll find me on YouTube, and you'll also find me on Rumble, a fairly new platform out there, a platform that doesn't censor you for the things you say, okay? So here we go. First of all, enabling your Active Directory password protection is going to enforce password protection all the way through your business. Now, I've had some discussions with people over the months, over the years about this whole thing and what should be done, what can be done, what cannot be done. Hey, it's a very big deal when it comes to password protection. And Active Directory, believe it or not, even though it's a Microsoft product, is pretty darn good at a few things. One of them is controlling all of the machines and the devices. One of the things we do is we use an MDM, or what used to be a mobile device manager, called Mass 360. It's available from IBM. We have a special version of that allows us as a managed security services provider to be able to control everything on people's machines. But Active Directory is something you should seriously consider. If you are a Mac-based shop like I am, in fact, I'm sitting right now in front of 2 Macs that I'm using right now, you'll find that Active Directory is a little bit iffy sometimes for Macs. There are some workarounds, and it's gotten better. Mass 360 is absolutely the way to go. But make sure you've got really good passwords. And the types of passwords that are most prone to spraying attacks are the ones you should be banning specifically. Remember the website, Have I Been Pwned? Yeah, it's something that you should go to pretty frequently. And again, if you miss anything today, just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. Believe me, I am not going to harass you at all, okay? Now, the next thing that you should be doing is what's called red team, blue team. Now, the red team is a group of people, usually outside of your organization. If you're a big company, they're probably inside. But the red team is the team that attacks you. They're white hat hackers who are attacking you, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for things that you should or shouldn't be doing. And then the blue team is the side that's trying to defend. So think of like war games. Remember that movie with Matthew Broderick all of those decades ago? And how he was trying to defend. That computer was trying to defend, then it moved into an attack mode, right? Red team's attack, blue team is defend. So you want to conduct simulated attacks. Now, conducting these attacks includes saying, oh my, let's now put in place and execute our plan here for what are we going to do once we have a breach. And you darn well better have a breach plan in place. So that's one of the things that we help as a fractional chief information security officer for companies, right? You got to get that in place. And you have to conduct these simulated attacks, and you have to do penetration testing, including password spraying attacks. There's so many things you can do. One of the things that we like to do, and that you might want to do, whether you're a home user, retiree, or a business, is go and look online. You can just use Google. I use far more advanced tools, but you can use Google and look for your email address right there. Look for the names of people inside your organization. And then say, wait a minute, does that data actually need to be there? Or am I really exposing the company, exposing people's information that shouldn't be out there? Because remember, the hackers, one of the things they do is they phish you. Phish as in PH. So they'll send you an email that looks legit. Hey, let me see. I know that Mary is the CFO, and I know that Joe's going to be out of town for 2 weeks, and the Bahamas not a touch. So while he's gone, I'm going to send an email to Mary to get her to do something to transfer the company's funds to me, okay? So that's what that's all about. You've got to make sure, where is our information? And if you go to my company's page, mainstream.net, you'll see on there that I don't list any of the officers, any of the people that are in the company, because that, again, is a security problem. We're letting them know. I go to some of these sites, like professional sites, lawyers, doctors, accountants, and I find right there all of their people, right? Their top people, or sometimes all of them. And they'll say, yeah, I went to McGill University, went to Harvard, whatever it might be. It's all there. So now they've got great information to phish you, to phish that company, because all they have to do is send an email saying, hey, remember me? We're in Harvard, we're in this class together. And did you have as a professor? Do you see how that works? Okay. You also want to make sure that you implement what's called a passwordless user agent. And this is just so effective. If they cannot get into your account, what could possibly go wrong? But one of the ways to not allow them into the account is to use biometrics. We use something called Duo, and we have that tied into the single sign-on, and the Duo single sign-on works great, because what it does now is I go to a site, I put in my username, and it pulls up a special splash page that is running on one of our servers that again asks me for my Duo username. So I've got my username for the site, then my Duo username and my Duo password, single sign-on, and then it sends me to an app on my smart device a request saying, hey, are you trying to log into Microsoft and whatever it might be at Microsoft? And you can say yes or no. And it uses biometrics. So those biometrics now are great, because it says, oh, okay, I need a face ID, or I need a thumbprint, whatever it might be. That allows a generalized passwordless access, okay? Passwordless meaning no password. So those are some of the top things you can do when it comes to prevention. And if you use those, they're never going to be able to get at your data because it's something you have along with something. It works great. And we like to do this. Some customers don't like to go through those hoops of the single sign-on and using Duo and making that all work, right? We're fine with it. We've got to keep ourselves at least as secure as the DoD regulations require, unlike almost anybody else in the industry. I'm not going to brag about it. But some of our clients don't like to meet the tightest of controls, and so sometimes they don't. I hate to say that, but they just don't. And it's a fine line between getting your work done and being secure. But I think there's some compromises that can be readily made. We're going to talk next about saving your data from ransomware and the newest ransomware. We're going to talk about the third generation that's out there right now, ransomware. It's getting crazy, let me tell you. And what it's doing to us and what you can do. What is a good backup? That has changed over the last 12 months. It's changed a lot. I used to preach 321. There's a new sheriff in town. Stick around. CraigPeterson.com. 321. That used to be the standard, the gold standard for backing up. It is no longer the case. With now the third generation of ransomware, you should be doing something even better, and we'll talk about it now. We're doing this as a simulcast here. It's on YouTube. It is also on Rumble. It's on my website at CraigPeterson.com because we're going through the things that you can do, particularly if you're a business, to stop the Russian invasion. Because as we've been warned again and again, the Russians are after us and our data. So if you missed part of what we're talking about today or you missed last week's show, make sure you send me an email, me at CraigPeterson.com. This is the information you need if you are responsible in any way for computers. That means in your home, right? Certainly in businesses, because what I'm trying to do is help and save those small businesses that just can't afford to have full-time true cybersecurity personnel on site. So that's what the whole fractional chief information security officer thing is about, because you can't possibly afford it. And believe me, the guy that comes in to fix your computers is no cybersecurity expert. And these people that are attacking are full-time cybersecurity experts, and they're coming from every country in the world, including coming from the U.S. We just had more arrests last week. So let's talk about ransomware quickly here. Ransomware, very big problem, been around a long time. The first version of ransomware was software, got onto your computer through some mechanism, and then you had that red screen. We've all seen that red screen. And it says, hey, pay up, buddy. It says here you need to send so many Bitcoin or fraction of a Bitcoin or so many dollars worth of Bitcoin to this Bitcoin wallet. And if you need any help, you can send email here or do a live chat. They're very sophisticated. We should talk about it some more at some point. That was generation one. Generation two was not everybody was paying the ransoms. So what did they do at that point? Well, they said, let me see if we could ransom the data by encrypting it and having them pay us to get it back. 50% of the time-ish, you got all your data back. Okay, not very often. Not often enough, that's for sure. Or what we could do is let's steal some of their intellectual property. Let's steal some of their data, their social security number, their bank account numbers, etc. They're in an Excel spreadsheet on their computer. And then if they don't pay that first ransom, we'll tell them if they don't pay up, we'll release their information. Sometimes you'll pay that first ransom and then they will hold you ransom a second time, pretending to be a different group of cyber terrorists, okay? Number three, round three is what we're seeing right now. And this is what's coming from Russia, near as everything we can tell. And that is they are erasing our machines. Totally erasing them. Pretty sophisticated ways of erasing it as well, so that it's impossible to recover. It's sophisticated in that it doesn't delete some key registry entries until right at the very end, and then reboots the computer, and of course there's no computer left to reboot, right? It's lost everything off of that hard drive or SSD, whatever your boot device is. So let's talk about the best ways here to do some of this backup and saving your data from ransomware. Now, you need to use off-site disconnected backups, no question about it. So let's talk about what's been happening. Hospitals, businesses, police departments, schools, they've all been hit, right? And these ransomware attacks are usually started by a person clicking a link in an email. Now, this is a poison link most of the time. It used to be a little bit more where it was a Word document, an Excel document that had something nasty inside. Microsoft, as I've said many times, has truly pulled up their socks, okay? So it doesn't happen as much as it used to. Plus, with Malware Defender turned on in your Windows operating system, you're going to be a little bit safer. Next up, a program tries to run, okay, and it effectively denies access to all of that data because it's encrypted it. And usually what it does, so that your computer still works, is it encrypts all of your Word docs, your Excel docs, your databases, right? All the stuff that matters. And once they've got all of that encrypted, you can't really access it. Yeah, the file's there, but it looks like trash. Now, this new disturbing trend has really developed over the last few months. So in addition to encrypting your PC, it can now encrypt an entire network and all mounted drives, even drives that are mirroring cloud services. Remember this, everybody. This is really a big deal, because what will happen here is if you have, let's say you've got an O drive or G drive or some drive mounted off of your network, you have access to it from your computer, right? Yeah, you click on that drive and now you're in there in the Windows side. Unix and Macs are a little different, but same general idea. You have access to it. You have right access to it. So what they'll do is any mounted drive, like those network drives, is going to get encrypted. But the same thing is true if you are attaching a USB drive to your computer. So that USB drive now that has your backup on it gets encrypted. So if your network is being used to back up, and if you have a thumb drive, a USB drive, it's not really a thumb drive, right? It's an external drive, but connected via USB, hooked up, and that's where your backup lives, you're in big trouble because you have lost it. And there have been some pieces of software that have done that for a while. And when they can encrypt your network drive, it is really going after a whole bunch of people, because everyone that's using that network drive is now effective, and it is absolutely devastating. So the best way to do this is you do a bit of a local backup. We will usually put a server at the client site that is used as a backup destination. Okay, so that server's the destination, all of the stuff gets backed up there, it's encrypted, it's not on the network per se, it's using a special encrypted protocol between each machine and the backup server, and then that backup server's data gets pushed off site. Some of our clients, we even go so far as to push it out to a tape drive, which is really important too, because now you have something physical that is, by the way, encrypted, that cannot be accessed by the attacker at all. It's off-site. So we have our own data center that we run, that we manage, that no one else has access to. It is ours. And we push all of those backups off-site to our data center, which gives us another advantage. If a machine crashes badly, right? The hard disk fails. Heaven forbid they get ransomware. We've never had that happen to one of our clients. Just we've had it happen prior to them becoming clients, is that we can now restore that machine either virtually in the cloud, or we can restore it right onto a piece of hardware and have them up and running in 4 hours. It can really be that fast, but it's obviously more expensive than some people are looking to pay. All right, stick around. We got a little more to talk about when we come back. What are the Russians doing? How can you protect your small business? If you're a one-man, one-woman operation, believe it, you've got to do this as well, or you could lose everything. In fact, I think our small guys have even more to lose. CraigPeterson.com. Backups are important. We're going to talk about the different types of backups right now, what you should be doing, whether you're a one-person little business or you are a multinational. Obviously, scale matters. Protecting your data is one of the most important things you can possibly do. I have clients who had their entire operating account emptied out, completely emptied. It's just amazing. I've had people pay a lot of money to hackers to try and get data back. And I go back to this one lady over in Eastern Europe who built a company out of $45 million all by herself. And of course, you probably heard about the Shark Tank people, right? Barbara Cochran, how she almost lost $400,000 to a hacker. In fact, the money was on its way when she noticed what was going on and was able to stop it. So thank goodness she was able to stop it. But she was aware of these problems, was looking for the potential, and was able to catch it. How many of us are paying that much attention? Now, one of the things you can do that will usually kind of protect you from some of the worst outcomes when it comes to ransomware is to back up. And I know everybody says, yeah, I'm backing up. It's really rare when we go in and we find a company's been backing up properly. It even happens to us sometimes. We put a backup regimen in place and things seem to be going well, but then when you need the backup, oh my gosh, we just had this happen a couple of weeks ago. Actually, last week. This is what happened. We have something called an FMC, which is a controller from Cisco that actually controls firewalls in our customers' locations. This is a big machine. It monitors stuff. It's tied into this ICE server, which is looking for nastiness. We're bad guys trying to break in, right? It's intrusion detection and prevention, and tying it into this massive network of 1 billion data points a day that Cisco manages, okay? It's absolutely huge. And we're running it in a virtual machine network. So we have 2 big blade chassis full of blades, and blades are, each blade is a computer. So it has multiple CPUs, it has a whole bunch of memory, it also has in there storage. And we're using something that VMware calls vSAN. So it's a little virtual storage area network that's located inside this chassis, and there are multiple copies of everything. So if a storage unit fails, you're still okay. Everything stays up. It keeps running. And we have it set up so that there's redundancy upon redundancy. One of the redundancies was to back it up to a file server that we have that's running ZFS, which is phenomenal. Let me tell you, it is the best file system out there. I've never, ever had a problem with it. It's just crazy. I can send you more information if you're ever interested. Just email me at CraigPeterson.com anytime. Be glad to send you the open source information, whatever you need. But what had happened is somehow the boot disk of that FMC, that firewall controller, had been corrupted. So we thought, oh, okay, no problem. Let's look at our backups. Yeah, hadn't backed up since October 2019. Yeah, and we didn't know. It had been silently failing obviously we're putting stuff in place to stop that from ever happening again. So we are monitoring the backups. That network of disks that was making up that storage area network that had the redundancy failed because the machine itself somehow corrupted its file system. ext4 file system, right? They're not supposed to be corruptible, but the journal was messed up, and it was, man, what a headache. And so they thought, oh, okay, you're going to have to reinstall. And we were sitting there saying, oh, you're kidding me. Reinstalling this FMC controller means we got to configure our clients' firewalls that are being controlled from this FMC, all of their networks, all of their devices. We got to put it all. This is going to take a couple of weeks. So because I've been doing this for so long, I was able to boot up an optics disk and mount the file system and go in manually underneath the whole FMC, this whole firewall controller, and make repairs to it. Got it repaired and then got it back online. So thank goodness for that. So it happens to the best of us. But I have to say, I have never had a new client where they had good backups, ever. Okay? That should tell you something. So if you are a business, a small business, whatever it might be, check your backups, double check them. Now, when we're running backups, we do a couple of things. We go ahead and make sure the backup is good. So remember I mentioned that we have a backup server that sits on site, usually, depends on the size of the client, but sits on site at the client's site. So it will perform the backup. It then tries actual restore of that backup to make sure it's good. And we can even, for our clients, depending on what they want, so a higher level, if a machine goes down, let's say it catches fire, disk explodes in it, or completely fails, we can actually bring that machine online inside our backup server at the customer site. Yeah, how's that for fancy? And bring it back online in just a matter of minutes instead of days or weeks. So that's true too if that machine had been ransomed, had its data erased, whatever might have happened to it, we can restore it. Now, we've never had to, knock on wood, except when there was a physical problem with the machine. And as a rule, starting from scratch, we can get that machine, the new machine, online in 4 hours or less. And it's really cool the way it works. If you like this stuff, man, it is great. Okay, protecting your data. I'm rambling a little bit here. You need an archival service. There's companies out there like Iron Mountain. You can, at your local bank, depending on the bank, it ain't like it used to be, get a box, right? A special box in the vault that you can put the tapes and other things in. Nowadays, there's cloud options, virtual tape backup options, which is a lot of what we use and we do, okay? We also use straight cloud at the very bottom end. Again, it's not located on the network. It's up in the cloud. It's double encrypted. It's absolutely the way to do. Now, if you're going to have a backup, and if that backup you want to be secure, it must not be accessible, okay, to the attacker. You've got to put some literal airspace between your backups and the cyber criminals. It's called an air gap. So there's no way for them to get to it, okay? Now, I want you to consider seriously using tape. These LTO, these linear tape drives, they've been around for a long time, but they're cartridges you can pull in and out, and they're huge. They're physically small, but they can hold terabytes worth of data. They're absolutely amazing. There's some great disk-based backup systems. That's what we do. Some of them have been around a long time, and they can be quite reasonably priced, all right? So it's something for you to consider, but you've got to have at least that air gap in order to make sure that you're going to be protected. What should you be looking for in a backup system? This is called 3221, which means maintain at least 3 copies of your data, store the backups on 2 different media, store at least one of the copies at an offsite location, store at least one of the copies offline, and be sure to have verified backups without errors. Okay, does that sound a little complicated? 32110 is what it's called. It used to be 321, now it's 32110. I can send you, Karen put together a special report on this based on our research, and I can share that with you absolutely free. Hey guys, if you want it, you got it, but you got to ask me. Just email me, me@craigpeterson.com. This is absolutely essential if you're a small business, a tiny business, to do it this way. Let me tell you, okay? This is just huge. Physical backups should be stored off-site. I mentioned the bank vault. A lot of people just go ahead and take them home with them. That might be a disk, it might be a tape, it can be a little bit complicated to do. And I've picked up customers that thought they were backing up, they were using a USB drive, they were putting it in dutifully every Monday, and then every Wednesday, what happens? Every Wednesday, they bring in Wednesday's disk, and then they bring that disk home. And then Thursday, they bring in the Thursday disk, and none of them had been working. Okay, so be very careful. All of your backups should be encrypted. We encrypt it at the customer's site, and then we re-encrypt it when we bring it over to us, okay? Keys are essential, particularly if you're using a cloud-based backup. Don't use the same keys across multiple backups. Very important there. You should have some good procedures that are well documented. Test your restorers, because very frequently we find they don't work. In fact, that's the number one problem, right? If they had just tried to restore even once from their backup, they would have known they had problems. And get those backups scheduled on a regular schedule. Okay, so there's a lot more offline backups and more that we can talk about another time, but this is important. If you want any help, send me an email. Just put backups in the subject line. I'll send you some stuff. Email me, me@craigpeterson.com. Now, I am more than glad to help pretty much anybody out there. I'm not going to help the Vladimir Putin, but anybody else I'll help. But you got to reach out, okay? You listen here, and I know some of this stuff is over some of our heads, some of your heads. You're the best and brightest. That's why you're listening, and I'll help you out. I'll send you some information that's going to get you on the right track. Me, me@craigpeterson.com. That's Craig Peterson, S-O-N. Have a great day. We just got an email this week from a customer, and they're saying, oh no, my email's been hacked. What does that mean? Was it really hacked? We're going to talk right now about email spoofing, which is a very big deal. Email spoofing's been a problem for a long time, really since the 1970s. I remember when I got my first spoof email back in the 80s, and it was really a little bit confusing. I went into it in more detail, of course, being a very technical kind of guy, and looked behind the curtains, figured out what was going on, and just shook my head. I marveled at some people. Why would you do this sort of thing? The whole idea behind email spoofing is for you to receive an email that looks like it's from someone that it's not. Now, you've all seen examples of this. Everybody has. Those emails that are supposedly from the bank, or maybe from Amazon, or some other type of business, or family friend. This is part of what we call social engineering, where the bad guys are using a little bit about what they know about you, or maybe another person, in order to, frankly, fool you. That's what spoofing really is. There were a lot of email accounts that were hacked over the last, 30, 40 years. And you might remember this people sending out an email saying, oh, my account got hacked, because you just got emails from them. Back in the day, what people were trying to do is break into people's email accounts, and then the bad guys, after having broken in, now knew everybody that was in the contact list from the account that was just broken into. Now they know, hey, listen, this person sends some email. Maybe I can just pretend I'm them. The same thing still happens, but now typically what you're seeing is a more directed attack. So a person might even look in that email account that they've broken into and poke around a little bit and find out, oh, okay, so this person's account I just broke into is a purchasing manager at a big company. So then they take the next step, or maybe the step after that, and try and figure out, okay, so now what do I do? Okay. So really what I can do now is send fake purchase orders or send fake requests for money. I've seen in the past with clients that we've picked up because the email was acting strangely, where a bad guy went ahead, found invoices that have been sent out by the purchasing person and sent the invoices out and changed the pay to information on the invoice. So they took the PDFs that they found on the file server of the invoices, went in and changed the account that they wanted the funds ACH'd into, and once they had that happen, they just sent the invoice out again saying overdue. Off it goes in the email, and the company receives it and says, oh, okay, need to pay this invoice. Now, sometimes they mark them overdue. Sometimes they didn't mark them overdue. I've seen both cases. And now the money gets sent off, and that invoice gets paid, and it gets paid to the wrong person. Or maybe they go ahead and they don't send the invoice out, but they just send a little notification saying, hey, our account has changed. Make sure you direct all future payments to this account instead. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second here now. They send this email out. It's going to go into a bank account. I can recover the money. Well, no, you can't, because what they're doing is they are using mules. Now, you've heard of mules before. You might have even seen that recent Clint Eastwood movie. I think it was called Mule. But typically when we think of mules as people, we're thinking about people who are running drugs. Well, in this case, the bad guys use mules in order to move money around. Now, sometimes people know what they're doing. The FBI's had some really great arrests of some people who were doing this, particularly out in California. Some of them claimed, yeah, I didn't know what was happening. It's just somebody asked me to send money. It's like the Nigerian scam, where in the Nigerian scam, they say, hey, I'm a Nigerian prince. You've heard of these things before. And I need to get my money out of the country. I need a place to put the money. And so if you have a U.S. account, I'm going to transfer money into it. You can keep $1,000 of that $5,000 I'm going to wire in just as a fee. Thanks for doing this. It's so important and it's such a hurry. And I'm going to send you, what they'll often do is send you a money order. It could be a bank check. It could be a lot of things. And then you go ahead and you cash it. Oh, okay, it cashed just fine. And then you wire the $4,000 off to the bad guy. The bad guy gets the money and is off and running. In the meantime, your bank is trying to clear that bank check or that money order. And they find out that there is no money there because, frankly, what might have happened, this is one I've seen. I'm telling you about a story. We helped to solve this problem, but had taken out a real money order from a bank, and then they made copies of it, basically. They just forged it. And so they forged 100 copies of it. So people thought they were getting a legitimate money order, and in some cases, the banks where the money order was being deposited did confirm it. They called up the source bank. Oh, yeah, that's a legit money order. And then they all hit within a week or two. And now you are left holding the bag. So that's one thing that happens. But typically with these mules, the money comes to them in that account. They are supposed to then take that money and put it in their PayPal account and send it off to the next person. And it might jump through 2 or 3 different people, and then it ends up overseas. And the bad guys have gotten so good at this and have the cooperation of some small countries, sometimes bigger countries, that they actually own the bank overseas that the money ultimately gets transferred into, and of course there's no way to get the money back. It's a real problem. So with spoofing, they're trying to trick you into believing the email is from someone that you know or someone that you can trust, or as I said, maybe a business partner of some sort. In most cases, it's some sort of a colleague, a vendor, or a trusted brand. And so they exploit the trust that you have, and they ask you to do something or divulge information. They'll try and get you to do something. So there's more complex attacks like the ones that I just explained here that are going after financial employees. There might be an accountant, a bookkeeper, a bill payer, receivables, payables. I've seen CFO attacks, but the spoofed email message looks legitimate on the surface. They'll use the legitimate logo of the company that they're trying to pretend that they're from. For instance, PayPal, phishing attack, they have a spoofed email sender. And typical email clients, like you might be using, for instance, a Microsoft Outlook, the sender address is shown on the message, but most of the time nowadays, the mail clients hide the actual email address, or if you just glance at it, it looks legitimate. You've seen those before, these forged email headers. Yeah, it gets to be a problem. Now, we use some software from Cisco that we buy. You have to buy, I think it's 1,000 licenses at a time, but there's some others out there. Cisco, again, by far the best. And the software receives the email. So before it even ends up in the Exchange server or somewhere else online, that email then goes through that Cisco server. They are comparing it to billions of other emails that they've seen, including in real time emails that are right now. And they'll look at the header of the email message. You can do that as well with any email client. You can look at the header. Microsoft in Outlook calls it view source. But if you look at the email header, you'll see received headers that are in there. So say received : from, and it'll give a name of a domain. And then you'll see another received header, and it'll give another name of a machine, and it'll include the IP address, might be IPv4 or v6, and you can then follow it all the way through. So what'll happen is partway through, you'll see it took a hop that is definitely not legitimate. That's where it comes in. Nowadays, if you have an email address for your business, a domain, you need to be publishing what are called SPF records. And those SPF records are looked at, they're compared to make sure that the email is properly signed and is from the correct sender. There's SPF records. There's some others, too, that you should have in place. But you'll see that in the headers if you're looking in the headers. So it gets pretty complicated. The SPF, which is the Sender Policy Framework, is a security protocol standard. It's been around now for almost a decade. It's working in conjunction with what are called domain-based message authentication, reporting and conformance headers, DMARC headers to stop malware and phishing attacks, and they are very good if you use them properly. But unfortunately, when I look, I would say still 95% of emails that are being sent by businesses are not using this email spoofing and protection. So have a look at that, and I can send you a couple articles on it if you're interested. CraigPeterson.com. So we've established that email spoofing happens. What are the stats to this, and how can you further protect yourself from email spoofing, particularly if you're not the technical type controlling DNS records? That's what's up, right? Hey everybody, Craig Peterson here, your cybersecurity strategist, and you're listening to News Radio, WGAN. AM 560 and 98.5 FM. Join me on the Morning Drive Wednesday mornings at 7:34, of course, in the AM. There's so much going on in the cybersecurity world. It affects all of us now. I think back to the good old days 40 years ago where we weren't worried about a lot of this stuff, spoofing, etc. But what we're talking about right now is 3.1 billion domain spoofing emails sent every day. That's a huge thing. More than 90% of cyber attacks start with an email message. Email spoofing and phishing have had a worldwide impact, costing probably $26 billion over the last 5 years. A couple of years ago, the FBI, this is 2019, reported that about 500,000 cyber attacks were successful. 24% of them were email-based, and the average scam tricked users out of $75,000. Yeah, so it's no wonder so many people are concerned about their email and whether or not those pieces of email are really a problem for them and anybody else out there. So a common attack that uses spoofing is CEO fraud, also known as business email compromise. So this is where the attacker is spoofing or modifying, pretending to be a certain person that they're not. They're impersonating an executive or owner, maybe of a business, and it targets people in the financial accounting or accounts payable departments or even the engineering department. And that's what happened with one of our clients this week. They got a very interesting spoofed email. So even when you're smart and you're paying attention, you can be tricked. The Canadian city treasurer was tricked into transferring $100,000 from taxpayer funds. Mattel tricked into sending $3 million to an account in China. A bank in Belgium tricked into sending the attacker 70 million euro. It happens, and I have seen it personally with many businesses out there. So how do you protect yourself from email spoofing? Even with email security in place, there's some malicious email messages that are still going to get through to the inboxes. Now, we're able to stop better than 96% of them just based on our stats. In fact, it's very rare that one gets through. But here are some things you can do and watch out for. Whether you're an employee responsible for financial decisions or maybe you're someone who uses personal email at work, here's some tricks here. So get your pencil ready. Number 1, never click links to access a website where you're asked to log in. Always type in the official URL into your browser and authenticate on the browser. In other words, if you get an email from your bank or someone else and there's a link in there to click that says, hey, oh man, here's some real problems, we got to respond right away. Don't do that. Go to paypal.com or your bank or your vendor site. Just type it into your browser. Even though you can hover over the email link and see what it is, sometimes it can be perfectly legitimate and yet it looks weird. For instance, when I send out my emails that people subscribe to, that right there on craigpeterson.com, the links are going to come from the people that handle my email lists for me, because I send out thousands of emails at a time to people that have asked to get those emails. So I use a service, and the service is taking those links, modifying them somewhat, in fact, dramatically, and using that to make sure the delivery happened, people are opening it, and that I'm not bothering you, so you can unsubscribe. Next step here. You can, if you want to dig in more, look at the email headers. Now, they're different for every email client. If you're using Outlook, you have to select the email basically in the left-hand side. and you're going to control click on that email, and it'll come up and you'll see something that says view source. So in the Outlook world, they hide it from you. If you're using a Mac and Mac Mail, all you have to do is go to up in the menu bar, email, and view header, and ta-da, there it is. I have many times in the past just left that turned on, so I'm always seeing the headers. It reminds me to keep a look at those headers. So if you look in the headers, if the email sender is, let me put it this way, if the person who is supposed to have sent it to you is doing headers properly, you're going to see a received SPF section of the headers. And right in there, you can look for a pass or fail response, and that'll tell you if it's legit. So in other words, let's use PayPal as an example. PayPal has these records that it publishes that say, all of our emails are going to come from this server or that server. That is it. And I do the same thing for my domains, and we do the same thing for our clients' domains. So it's something that you can really count on if you're doing it right, that this section of the headers. And that's what I was talking about earlier. If you have an email that you're sending out from your domain and you don't have those proper headers in it, there's no way to truly authenticate it. Now, I go a step further and I use GPG in order to sign most of my emails. Now, I don't do this for the trainings and other things, but direct personal emails from me will usually be cryptographically signed, so you can verify that it was me that sent it. It really was. Another thing you can do is copy and paste the text, the body of that email into a search engine. Of course, I recommend DuckDuckGo in most cases. And the chances are that, frankly, they've sent it to multiple people. That's why I was saying our Cisco-based email filter, that's what it does. It looks for common portions of the body for emails that are known to be bad. Be suspicious of email from official sources like the IRS. They're not going to be sending you email out of the blue. Most places aren't. Obviously, don't open attachments from people that you don't know. Suspicious ones particularly. People will send PDFs that are infected. It's been a real problem. They'll send, of course, Word docs, Excel docs, etc. as well. And the more of a sense of urgency or danger that's a part of the email should really get your suspicions up, frankly, because suggesting something bad's going to happen if you don't act quickly, that kind of gets around part of your brain, and it's the fight or flight, right? Hey, I got to take care of this. I got to take care of this right away. And maybe you don't. So those are the main things that you can pay attention to in the emails. If you are a tech person and you're trying to figure this out, how can I make the emails safer for our company? You can always drop me an email as well, me@craigpeterson.com. I can send you to a couple of good sources. I'll have to put together a training as well on how to do this. But as individuals, at least from my standpoint, a lot of this is common sense. And unfortunately, the bad guys have made it so email is something we can no longer completely trust. Spoofing's a problem. As I said, we just saw it again this week. Thank goodness it was all caught and stopped. The account was not hacked. It was just a spoofed email from an account outside the organization that was hacked. CraigPeterson.com. Stick around. The value of crypto coins has been going down lately quite a bit across the board, not just Bitcoin, but the amount of crypto mining and crypto jacking going on, that hasn't gone down much at all. Hi, I'm Craig Peterson, your cybersecurity strategist, and you're listening to News Radio, WGAN AM 560 and FM 98.5. You can join me on the Morning Drive every Wednesday morning at 7:34. Matt and I go over some of the latest in news. You know about crypto coins, at least a little bit, right? These are the things like Bitcoin and others that are ostensibly private, but in reality aren't that private. If you receive coins and you spend coins, you are probably trackable. And if you can't spend the cryptocurrencies, why even bother getting it in the first place? One of the big drivers behind the price of these cryptocurrencies has been criminal activity. We've talked about that before. Here's the problem we're seeing more and more nowadays. Even though the price of Bitcoin might go down 30%, which it has, and it's gone down in bigger chunks before, it does not mean that the bad guys don't want more of it. And what better way to mine cryptocurrency than to not have to pay for it? So the bad guys have been doing something called cryptojacking. This is where criminals are using really ransomware-like tactics and poisoned websites to get your computer, even your smartphone, to mine cryptocurrencies for them. Mining a Bitcoin can cost as much in electric bills, or in fact more in electric bills, than you get from the value of the Bitcoin itself. So it's expensive for them to run it. Some countries like China have said, no, you're not doing it anymore because they're using so much electricity. Here in the U.S., we've even got crypto mining companies that are buying old power plants, coal-fired or otherwise, and are generating their own electricity there locally in order to be able to mine cryptocurrencies efficiently, effectively, so that they can make some profit from it. It's really quite the world out there. Some people have complained about their smartphone getting really hot. Their battery only lasts maybe an hour, and it's supposed to last all day. Sometimes what's happened is your smartphone has been hijacked. It's been cryptojacked. So your smartphone, they're not designed to sit there and do heavy computing all day long like a workstation is. Even your regular desktop computer probably isn't designed to be able to handle day-long mining that has to happen. In fact, the most efficient way to do crypto mining, of course, is using specialized hardware. But that costs them money, so why not just cryptojack, all right? There are two primary ways hackers have been getting victims' computers to secretly mine cryptocurrencies. One is to trick them into loading crypto mining code onto their computers. So that's done through various types of phishing-like tactics. They get a legitimate-looking email that tricks people into clicking on a link, and the link runs code. Now, what's interesting is you don't even, for cryptojacking, you don't even have to download a program in order to have your computer start mining cryptocurrencies for the bad guys. They can use your browser to run a crypto mining script. And it runs in the background as you work, right? Using up electricity, using up the CPU on your computer. They also will put it into ads. They'll put it on a website, and your browser goes ahead and runs the code dutifully, right? So they're really trying to maximize their returns. So that's the basics of cryptojacking. What's been particularly bad lately has been the hackers breaking into cloud accounts and then using those accounts to mine cryptocurrency. One of the trainings that I had on my Wednesday Wisdoms has to do with password stuffing. And my Wednesday Wisdoms you can get by just subscribing to my email over there at craigpeterson.com. But what happens here is they find your email address, they find your password on one of these hacks that has occurred on the dark web. You weren't on the dark web, but your username or email address and password are there on the dark web. And then they just try it. So a big site like Amazon or maybe Azure, IBM also has cloud services, can be sitting there running along very well, having fun, life's good, and then they go ahead and try your email address and password to try and break in. Now, you know how I keep telling everybody, use a good password manager. And this week, I actually changed my opinion on password managers. So you know that I really like the password manager that you can get from onepassword.com. It really is fantastic, particularly for businesses, various types of enterprises, onepassword.com. However, where I have changed is that some of these browsers nowadays, particularly thinking about Firefox, Google Chrome, Safari, particularly if you're on a Mac, all have built-in password managers that are actually quite good now. They check Have I Been Pwned, which is a site I've taught you guys about for years, to make sure that your accounts are reasonably safe, they're not being found on the dark web, the new password that it came up with or that you want to use, they check that as well, make sure it's not in use. So here's an example here. This is a guy by the name of Chris Chin. He lives out in Seattle, Washington, and he makes mobile apps for local publishers. Just this year, New Year's Day, he got an alert from Amazon Web Services. Now, Amazon Web Services, of course, cloud service. They've got some really nice stuff, starting with Lightship and going up from there. I've used various services from them since they started offering the services, so very many years. And they allow you to have a computer, and you can get whatever size computer you want to, or fraction of a computer you want to. He got this alert because it said that he owed more than $53,000 for a month's worth of hosting. Now, his typical Amazon bill is between $100 and $150 a month. My typical Amazon bill is $50 to maybe $80 a month. I cannot imagine getting a $53,000 bill from our friends at Amazon. So the poor guy was just totally freaking out, which is a very big deal. So I'm looking at an article from Insider that you can find at businessinsider.com. They were able to confirm that, yes, indeed, he got this $53,000 bill from Amazon. And yes, indeed, it looks like his account had been hacked by cryptocurrency miners. So these guys can run up just incredibly large charges for the raw computing power they need to produce some of these digital cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. There's many others out there. But this isn't new. This is happening all of the time. Google reported late last year that 86% of account breaches on its Google Cloud platform were used to perform cryptocurrency mining. So make sure you are using a good password manager that generates good passwords. And I have a special report on passwords. You can download it immediately when you sign up for my email, my weekly email newsletter at craigpeterson.com. And it tells you what to do, how to do it, what is a good password, what the thinking is, because it's changed on passwords. But do that and use two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication as well. And I talk about that in that special report too. And visit me online, sign up right now, craigpeterson.com. We're moving closer and closer to completely automated cars, but we want to talk right now about car hacks, because there was an interesting one this week that has to do with Tesla, and we'll talk about some of the other hacks on cars. Connected cars are coming our way in a very big way. We just talked about the shutdown of 2G and 3G in our cars. It wasn't really our cars, right? 2G, 3G, that was for our cell phones. That was data. Years ago, of course, now with 4G LTE, 5G, even 10G is being used in the labs right now. It's hard to think about some of those older technologies, but they were being used, and they were being used by cars primarily for the navigation features. Some cars use these data links, if you will, that are really on the cell phone network in order to do remote things, like a remote start, for instance. I have a friend whose Subaru, of course, was using that, and now she's got to do an upgrade on her car because that 3G technology is going away. Depending on the carrier, by the way, some of it's going away sooner, some of it's going away later, but it'll all be gone at the end of 2020. What are we looking at as we look into the future? I'm really concerned. I don't want to buy one of these new cars at the same time as I do, because they are cool. But I don't want to buy one of those because of the real problem that we could have of what? Well, of having that car need an upgrade and not being able to do it. I watched a video of a guy who took a Tesla that had been damaged badly in a flood, and was able to buy it for cheap. Why? Because Tesla will not sell you new motors and new batteries for a car like that. So he got the car for cheap. He found a Chevy Camaro that had been wrecked, but its engine and transmission were just fine. He ripped everything out of the Tesla and went ahead after that, because you got to clean it out. Water damage, he spray washed all to the inside. He got right down to the aluminum. Everything that wasn't part of that core aluminum chassis was gone. And then he built it back up again. He managed to keep all of those Tesla systems working. That screen that you have up front that does the temperature control, cruise, maps, everything else. He kept that. It was able to work. Not the automated cruise control type stuff. And now he had a very hot car that looked like a Tesla. He took it out to SEMA, which is pretty cool. I'd love to have seen it. But it was a Tesla with a big V8 gasoline engine in it. He's done quite a good job on it. It was quite amazing to see. It took them months. It was him and some of his buddies. These new cars are even more connected than my friend Subaru is. They get downloads from the factory. Some of them are using Wi-Fi. 5G, really one of the big promises of 5G is, hey, our cars can talk to each other. Because now you can get a millisecond delay in going from one car to another versus what you have today, which can be a half a second or more, which can be the difference between having a rear-end collision and being able to stop in time when it comes to these automated systems. So they are more connected. They connect to the Wi-Fi in your homes. They connect to, obviously, the 5G network, which is where things are going right now. But what's happening with the hackers? Because really what we're talking about isn't a computer on wheels. Oh, no. It is dozens of computers inside that car. And your car has a network inside of it and has had for many years. This CAN bus network, and even fancier ones nowadays, that connect all of your systems together. So your entertainment system, for instance, is connected to this network. And that was used, you might remember, a couple of years ago on a Chrysler product where the bad guy installed a little bit of software using a thumb drive onto that entertainment system and had a reporter drive that car down the road. This is all known. It was all controlled. and was able to, the bad guy, right, the demonstration in this case, I guess you'd call them a white hat hacker, he drove that car right off the road while the reporter was trying to steer otherwise. Because cars nowadays don't have a direct linkage between anything and anything. That's why I love my 1980 Mercedes diesel. You turn the steering wheel, it isn't actually connected to the wheels, to that front end of the car. All it's doing is telling the computer you want to turn and how much you want to turn. That brake pedal doesn't actually compress hydraulics and cause the brakes to engage. That fuel pedal doesn't actually move the throttle on the car. The throttle is really being controlled and moved by the computers. So the car is completely electronic. It feels like a regular car, right? We're not talking about the Teslas of today or tomorrow. We're talking about Volvos that have been sold for more than a decade. We're talking about a lot of different cars. So now you have a platform on wheels that can be dangerous, because it can be, in some cases, remotely controlled. It can have software that maybe crashes. We know that part of the infrastructure, quote-unquote bill, which contains almost no infrastructure. It's amazing how they name these things, isn't it? What is it, like 6% in actual infrastructure in the infrastructure bill? One of the things in there that is not infrastructure is a demand, a law that says the car manufacturers have to include a remote stop button, if you will, so that a police officer could go ahead and say, okay, I'm pursuing this car and they're not stopping. I don't want to risk people's lives as this bad guy tries to elude me here in back streets. Kids can get hit, etc. So they push the button and the car stops. That all sounds great, doesn't it? The problem is that you could potentially be opening some security problems by having this remote stop button that can be used by anybody, really, right? Since when is it going to be limited to just law enforcement? Isn't that a problem? According to Car and Driver, I'm looking at their magazine right now, they're saying that there were at least 150 automotive cybersecurity incidents in 2019. 150 incidents, part of a 94% year-over-year increase since 2016. In other words, every year, the number of automotive cybersecurity incidences has doubled, and that's according to a report from a company called Upstream Security. So we're also looking at what? Maybe ransomware for cars, so that your car gets hacked. You can't hack my 1980 Mercedes diesel. It's impossible to hack into an unconnected car. But if you are driving a vehicle, it's likely at risk from some sort of digital intrusion. We've even seen from some of the bugs, we've seen cars from Japan that have decided to drive into the Jersey barrier because it misunderstands exactly what it is. We've seen cars from Tesla that drive right into the back of a parked fire truck. Imagine doing that at speed, right? Because a fire truck full of water, etc. I've actually seen that one happen personally. So the more sophisticated the system is, the more connected your vehicle is, the more exposed you are. And Detroit Free Press has a great little article on that right now. And in there, he's saying, we have taken whatever model car you think of, and we hack them through various places. I can control your steering. I can shut down and start your engine, control your brakes, your doors, your wipers, open and close your trunk. There's a lot of people who are trying to break into these cars, and there's a lot of people who are trying to protect them. That hacker duo back in 2015 who took control of that Jeep Cherokee. Just think about that sort of thing. There's an Israeli-based automotive cybersecurity company who told the Free Press that he expects the current trend of hackers holding digital data on computers for ransom to also move to cars. So when this happens, the driver will not be able to start the vehicle until they pay off the ransom or suffer the consequences, which could be wiping the car's systems, operating systems, could be getting the car to catch on fire. Think of what can happen with heat generation with those batteries. There's no way around it. You're going to have to get it towed and get all of the software reloaded in the computer. And now this week it comes out that a 19-year-old kid said that he was able to hack into over 25 Teslas that he tried via a bug in a popular tool. It's an open source tool that people are using to link into their Teslas to do various types of remote control. And he posted a tweet on this. The guy's name's David Colombo. You'll find him on Twitter. It went viral. And he reported the vulnerability to the people who were maintaining the software. And they fixed it, in fact, the very same day. And Tesla also pushed updates to their vehicle that invalidated the signatures and the key exchanges that were happening. So this is a 19-year-old researcher. He's able to hack into cars in 13 countries, 13 countries, worth of Teslas without the owner's knowledge. Now, he says, I can unlock doors, I can turn off the security system, I can open windows, I can keyless start and things, turn on the stereo, honk the horn, view the car's location, and if the driver was present. But he doesn't think he could actually move the vehicle remotely. But that's a 19-year-old kid. What's going to happen when we implement the law that was just passed that says our cars have to be remotely controllable by anybody, basically? Yeah, it's scary. Hey, I want to invite you guys to take a minute. Go to craigpeterson.com. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter there, and I'll keep you up to date on all of this stuff. And you'll even get my show notes. craigpeterson.com.